And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Voice of Reason podcast. And once again, I have to lead out with saying this is not the handsome face of Sean Phillips, which is leading us out this evening. Big Hollywood boy is out there in his Hollywood land doing his Hollywood thing, and we have to let the Hollywood boy do the Hollywood thing, even though he took a minute to badmouth the Chiefs online like he always does, and so I let him have it. But anyway, I stand before you a broken man, but that's okay. We are live with as joined by always Travis Kirkendall and our special guest this evening, Mr. Jason Jarrett, one of my oldest and longest having friend who still claims me to be as such, I hope. So,
yeah, I do.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that.
At least at the start of the show.
Yeah, well, by the end, he's going to say, screw you, Van Beber, and the horse you rode in on, and that'll be that, and that'll be the end of it. So, I guess we start out by saying, Travis, how was your weekend, brother?
What did you say?
I said, how was your weekend?
Oh, it was good. I was I was actually home this weekend.
Amazing.
But I would have had no time to see you though. I got home. I got to my grandparents' house at like past midnight. I had a wedding for my cousin with family.
So you were down here. You were down here this weekend?
Yes.
Oh my!
I got to my grandparents. Hear me out. I got to my grandparents like past midnight Friday night. Woke up early Saturday. We had the ceremony and then the reception. It was like an all day thing, and then we left my grandparents like 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Drove out to my dad's to see him before we left, and then we drove back here to Chicago. And then we had dinner with some family of hers that were coming from out of town for the Chicago Marathon.
Priest, man, you put some miles on the old vehicle.
I had to put a lot of miles on my little Honda. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And then got home Sunday night at like midnight, 12:30, and got up to work this morning. We got up this morning for work. But it was a good weekend, though. It was.
Yeah, we for those who followed me on the old Facebook, I spent yesterday in the ER. I decided that I needed to take I did it purely on accident of my medication, my allergies. You guys have heard my voice for the last 3 weeks, and it sounded terrible. But I found out I don't have pneumonia. I don't have COVID. I just have really, really overactive allergies, and
I thought it was monkeypox.
There you go.
Too soon.
Yeah,
Okay,
too soon. But no, then I was, but I cleared. Don't have pneumonia. Don't have any of that stuff. And it basically just is a reaction to kids don't take more prednisone than what they say. And basically, I think I took one extra, and I think I was only supposed to take 2 a day, and I took 3 a day. And that's what got me all. But I'm better now, and I'm actually sounding better now than I have all week. So, but I want to introduce my friend Jason. Jason and I, let's see. We first knew each other back when my father pastored a church in a little dirt town called Modesto, Illinois. What's Modesto? About 150 people, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, something like that. Maybe 300. It might be 300. That's a big one down there.
But my dad was pastor of a church, and Jason went there from time to time. We met each other then. And then
current population is 252 for those keeping track. So it's probably 350 back then.
Yeah,
on the sign.
And then and then when I moved, Dad started a church in which I still consider. I spent most of my formative years in a little town called Waverly, which is about 20 to 25 miles southwest of Springfield, and that Jason and I reconnected there in 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th grade, I guess we could say we had a close group of about 4 of us, and I'd say Tony and Greg and me and Jason, and we spent a lot of our formative years together and did a lot of cool things, I guess. And then I was a jerk and ended up moving my senior year, but Jason and I stayed connected there for a while, and then kind of lost track of each other. And then we reconnected, of all times, when I was in China getting Bryson, and one of the members of our group had, of our friend group had, what kind of cancer was it that Tony had had? It was,
Yeah, colon cancer.
yeah. And Jason was messaging me because he was following me on. I knew where I was at, and he said, "Hey, Tony's not doing good, and he's probably not going to last much longer." And I had messaged our friend's wife, and she said, Tony understands and everything. And I was like, I'll be praying and everything. And then, well, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days later, Jason messaged me again and said, "Hey, Tony's passed. The funeral's going to be," and we had just gotten to China, and so Jason had messaged me that the mass was going to be that weekend, and I was like, and I mean that tore me up. And then Jason and I then saw each other for the first time, and I don't know. They had Tony's memorial service. His memorial mass was at his church, at his home church there, and that's been what's that been? That's been 10 years ago, right, Jason?
That was January of 2014.
Yeah, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And so Jason and I were able to reconnect, and we sat there and we talked. And over the years, Jason's kind of like, he's my high school version. For those of you who follow us and know my buddy Matt Edelman, Jason is my high school version of that, because Jason's not afraid to call me out and say, "Hey, prick, you were wrong on something."
Bullshit.
Yeah, and he'll call BS on me a lot. And
That's a good friend.
And that, well, and we were just talking last night, about how, real friends aren't afraid to call each other out. We don't pander to each other, and we'll call a duck a duck. And so, Jason, tell us about kind of where you went after we left Waverly and what you do now, and then we'll kind of ease into our conversation.
Well, so after Waverly, I went to University of Illinois for 4 years, where I studied architecture, and then it ended up in Chicago, not practicing architecture at all. I practice urban planning as a consultant. It's more interesting than it sounds. It's pretty. It's not an easy thing to explain, but we help get a lot of projects approved, and controversial projects. We work with condemnation, things like that. I'm actually in Villa Park, which is a west suburb of Chicago. If you know Chicago, probably know Elmhurst or Lombard more than you know Villa Park, but a few miles south of O'Hare. And I've moved around up here and so on, but I've been here for, let's see, what year is it? I've been so
old guys. This is what we do.
I've been in this house for 18 and a half years now.
Yeah.
So that is longer than I have been anywhere in my life, and I've now been in the Chicago metro area for more than half of my life, 26 years.
And Travis lives, and
don't think about that too hard, but
Travis isn't too far from you, I wouldn't imagine. But
no, I'm not. I'm up in Algonquin.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the company I work for, our shops there in Elmhurst. We're not too far from here.
I was just up in the south of Algonquin on a bike on Saturday. So.
Oh, nice.
Like the
Elgin,
Elgin areas. So.
I interrupted you though, but go continue. What?
No, I was just gonna say I've been married to my current wife we've been married since 2013. We got going back to Tony. I think Tony was the first person outside, including my family, to know that we were engaged, and he was essentially on his deathbed at the time. Not technically yet, but following his diagnosis, and then we tried to kind of I don't want to say fast forward the wedding so that he could be a part of it, but that didn't work out. He didn't have the months or year and a half that he thought he had, basically weeks.
Yeah.
So he was diagnosed in early September and passed away mid-November.
Mid-November.
So, and then we got married that December of 2013, and I've got an 18-year-old son who is both my pride and joy and pain in my ass. So, anybody with kids knows how that goes.
Yeah, and may the sins of the
story
father
of
be
me.
visited back upon him by.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea where we got a sense of sarcasm from.
Ah, yes, and there it is, folks. Yes, no, but what we were talking about last night, and I think part of this series that we wanted to kind of bring home was to talk about how, what we grew up in. And so Jason and I grew up in what's it safe to say? The town of Waverly has, you're the local historian, Jason, like 1,500, is that, we're at 1,500 somewhere in the neighborhood?
The sign said 1,500 for years. I think it's down a little bit now, but
and it's
most small towns are.
And it still is some, I mean, railroad goes through there. Used to be railroad crossroads that went through there. Now there's just the one railroad. They have there's a Panhandle Gas, which has stuff over here in West Central Illinois, has a plant, has a I don't know what you want to call it, a substation or whatever you want to call it outside of town, but it's a largely rural agricultural community. And
my grandfather actually moved to Waverly for Panhandle.
Yeah, and that's why Janine's dad moved to Waverly.
He moved from Pleasant Hill to Zionsville, Indiana, and then back to Waverly.
So he was a pipe fitter too. Was he a pipe fitter or what was he?
He's a welder.
Yeah, and
he's a welder.
Janine's dad was a pipe fitter, and that's why he came. But where we went to high school at, we had 30 some odd in our class, something like that.
Yeah, I think we were probably 42, 43 at the peak and graduated with maybe 38 or 39.
Yeah,
and we were one of the biggest classes to ever go through Waverly.
Yeah.
We were big enough they had to have 2 teachers to teach us.
Yeah. And
the class that was freshmen when we were seniors, I think they were like 11.
Yeah. Yes. You're right. Because that was Janine's brother's class. And that was they had an extremely small class. What's some of the when you look back on how we were raised, whether it was by our parents or by our teachers, have you applied in your life now?
Well, that's a tough question.
Just break it down however you want to.
Yeah, no, I think from school we had, like most schools, we had the wide gamut of teachers, from the brand new elementary school teachers that, weren't much older than, that were in their 20s. To Hot Rod
Rumpel.
Or Mr. Manning, our social studies teachers. They were the Andrew J. Van Bembers of Waverly, and I think they you had a poll up about 2 words that describe your favorite teacher or whatever, and I just posted it a little late, but I said challenged worldviews.
Which one was that in reference to?
And I would say that was probably the most in reference to Mr. Rumpel.
Yeah.
Mr. Manning just liked to stir stuff, but
yeah, he did.
Mr. Rumpel, it didn't matter who you were; he would challenge your worldview and get students to talking back and forth and debating what mattered. And we had Ellen Starr, "Waverly is not the world," was the plaque above her desk.
Yep.
Which is ironic for, God bless her, a teacher who's
yes,
still in Waverly. But Um, but yeah, and then as far as everyday life, I mean, I guess the probably the most both everyday life with my family. I grew up in a big family. My immediate family was four, but my big family was all local, being a small town. I think a lot of people don't have that anymore because families are smaller and people go farther away.
Yeah.
So having all of your cousins and sometimes second cousins and aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas within 45 minutes of you, or sometimes within 45 seconds of you, is
It's a bit
not as
overwhelming.
not as common as it used to be.
No, no.
But you learn to deal with I think you learn to deal with people kindly,
I, I
because you know each other.
I looked at some of our when I look at the teachers that we had, and Travis, just for an interesting note, Travis, the idea
Mm-hmm.
of the note card quiz came from one of
Okay.
the teachers that Jason just mentioned. Jason, do you remember note card quizzes?
Yes.
Okay, I use those in my class. Those came from Rod Rumpel, and I even told him about that last time that I saw him, and he's like, man, he said I don't even use those anymore. Blah blah blah. And those things have become thing of legend with me, but a lot of the way that I teach is based upon Rod Rumpel because he did one of the things that he told us to do, and I use a saying that he used a lot, and he said it to me a lot because I was a big doof in his class, and he would say stuff like, "Mr. Van Beber, you need to use your head for something other than a hat rack." And he had hundreds of quips that he would use to
Yeah.
put you in your place, but he wanted you to, the teachers that we had taught us how to think outside the box, and not just one thing that really stood with me, well, with him and Ron Manning, who another guy who I model some of my stuff that I do off of him, was if you can't take, I don't remember either one of those teachers going solely from just teaching from a book or from a set curriculum, but just putting it out there and saying, okay, here's how this looks. Take this and let's manipulate this into a real life situation. And that's what Rod Rumpel was for me, was somebody who said, take this. And then and you mentioned Ellen Gates Starr, who was our English teacher. And she was very, we were talking about this, we used this term in reference to something else last night, Jason, but she was very cosmopolitan in the fact that she was more refined, and she wanted to teach us, you know, I mean, it was because of her that I actually read and understood Shakespeare. You
Right.
know, we got it.
Because of her, I know how to fold a business letter.
Yes, yeah,
Not exactly
exactly. I
relevant
totally
these
forgot
days,
about
but
that.
but,
Yes,
but I know how.
yeah,
Uh, yeah.
and just tight and how to Margie Tolsdorf, who was probably one of my favorite teachers in high school.
Yes.
This little German woman, Travis. This little German woman.
Who
If she
taught
was,
French and English.
she taught French and English. If she was 4'11", that was giving her too much height. But she was a powerful woman in directing her classroom, and she was another one. I mean, how to write a paper, how to do proper research, and this is before the days of Google, and back, how kids use Wikipedia today was how we used encyclopedias back in the day. Okay, go more than just one source. Think outside the box. And
Yeah.
go ahead,
With
Jason.
Mr. Rumpel, you're saying Mr. Rumpel, like I said, challenged your worldview, and you said that wanted you to think out of the box. But his was a class where I think above all, you couldn't just bring an opinion
No,
to a
he
fight.
challenged. No, 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 no,
You
no, no, no.
whether you were debating another student, or whether you were debating something that he was saying was uh yeah, if you were challenging his view of something or you were challenging another student's view of something, you'd better bring some
Yeah,
facts because
you couldn't just you couldn't
he
just
was going to. You couldn't say, "Well, that's my opinion. I guess we'll have to agree to disagree."
well no
It
he
didn't work
wanted
that way in his class because typically when you say, "I guess we'll have to agree to disagree," it's because he ain't bringing facts.
well,
Um,
you had to have knowledge to back it up.
right,
I
and he would
mean,
help you find it if you didn't have it.
and we had a friend of ours who we still have a friend of ours, our buddy Greg, was one who whenever he and Rumpel would get, and Greg was just as stubborn. And Greg today is, I haven't kept connected with him, but he's part of that Trump far, that right side, and he was just like, he and Rumpel would go at it all the time, and there was stuff of legend.
Yeah.
But how do you, so when you apply some of that stuff, Jason, now to, so when we went from 19, we were in high school 1988 to 1992, and we're this generation, Gen Xers, and we bring, how did you, when you take that stuff, how do you apply that now to your mode of thinking and what you do now and where you're at now?
Well, I think I mentioned last night talking to you that going to U of I was an eye opener for me, right? Because some people might laugh, but I we said again, African Americans growing up in Waverly,
Nope.
you could count the ones you knew on one hand, and the number that lived in town was zero.
Yeah.
Um, it's like something as simple as saying somebody Jewish, like in Waverly. I mean, those concepts were completely foreign, and if you didn't have some of the education that you had, like we fortunately had teachers who were fairly open about those kind of conversations. We didn't have. I guess it's easy to not have a whole bunch of racial animosity in a school when there's nobody to have racial animus towards, right? But I think we had pretty open teaching, and you know, so when I went to U of I, it was an eye opener in a good way for me. And then you kind of see that, as Ellen Starr said, it's not sort of mocked, but Waverly's not the world, right? There's a big, big world outside of Waverly. And Margie Tolsdorf, who you mentioned, I was fortunate enough by selling hot dogs outside of Costco or wherever the hell it was to be blessed to go with her and a handful of other students to France for a few weeks as an 18-year-old from Waverly. Those kind of experiences, they change the way you look at everything. Not just politics or not just education or your job, but you can't quantify what those kind of experiences do for people.
Mm-hmm. When we got to the point of saying how we grew up, and the other aspect I want to look at is also how we were raised, because Waverly did not. I mean, Waverly is and was. I mean, it's not a. You don't have the. There wasn't the. And at least in my opinion, I don't remember a super rich part of town. There was no. If say, hey, this is the wealthy. I mean, are living on the other side of the tracks. To me, and I mean, you tell me what your perception of was it, Jason, but I never felt like there was. I felt like we were all kind of like in this same. There were some that were on the low social economic end, but there were most of us who were this middle class '80s working family.
Yeah, I think that was true. I mean, obviously, at various points, you had a student or two that was on one end or the other. there were a handful of students that were, uh, the parents or the children of, say, maybe the bigger farmers who,
Yeah,
came
yeah,
to school in nicer cars.
yeah.
They got a new IROC or something on their 16th birthday, and I was driving a 1970 Chevy pickup.
C10, baby.
Yeah,
C10. The
but
green C10.
and you had a handful of students that were on the opposite end of that, where um, we certainly had a couple of dirt floor houses in Waverly,
Yeah.
like literal dirt floor
Yep,
houses in
we sure
Waverly.
did.
There was not that there wasn't any of that, but yeah, the vast majority of us were smack in the middle. And then I think the other thing that made Waverly different um, than some of the other small towns around us is that Waverly was just big enough that, that we did have students that lived on farms for sure, but
Yeah.
the majority of
Socioeconomic.
students lived in town,
Yeah,
and most of the students who didn't live in town were on large working farms.
right. And
Um,
one of the things, and that kind of, to me, that kind of, and we talked about this last night, and in regards to what you just said, that really did keep us guarded. I don't know if that caged maybe even from the outside world, And we kind of joked about it last night. Where Waverly was at, you have to understand, Waverly was right on the fringe of civilization.
yeah,
You go, Travis, it would be like saying, okay, Waverly would be the Clarksville, Louisiana, and then you go farther south in Anada, Paynesville, and, where people don't
Yeah.
have that many teeth. And we had towns like, we mentioned Modesto. I lived in Modesto for 3 years, and that was, you know, but you have all these little small towns where, when I say, hey, we're going to go to town, that meant we're going to go uptown to the park or uptown to the grocery store. Whereas when we said we were
if
going
they
to
had a
town,
grocery store, they
if
probably didn't.
they didn't, right. And so we would go, we went, if we, small time, we'd go to Jacksonville, big time, we'd go to Springfield. And my dad would always say, okay, now this is where you don't go in Springfield and everything like that.
Don't go to the east side of Springfield.
Don't go over on the east side.
Don't go over there. Don't go over by
Don't
those projects.
don't go over John Hay homes. Don't go over there. But yes, Dad, we're going to drive into the projects. But that was, to me, that was part of, I say growing up sheltered like that. And it did take me, and Jason and I shared this last night, when I went off to college. I mean, I developed my friendship with my first friendship with an African American guy, and I thought, boy, I'm super, pat myself a little bit too hard on the back, but I didn't have the experience that Jason had, because Jason went to the University of Illinois. I went to Hannibal LaGrange University, which was
Yes,
more,
you did.
yeah, which was more, and it was, I don't want, it was a great education, but it still kept me in with like-minded people and and I didn't get outside of my box enough. Whereas, Jason was able to and I forgot how I said that last night, Jason. I think I said you broadened your worldview more in 1 month at the U of I than I did in all 4 years of college.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and some people, I think today, with today's generations is that, and Travis, you were thrown into that when you went into the Army, and when you traveled,
Yeah.
you traveled the world, and you had traveled and you saw different things. And I mean, what is and you're obviously a little bit younger than us, but what has challenged your world thinking so far into this part of your life so far?
Like, what was the